out of all of that. Let's go and talk about this, amongst other things, with our political panel. Jason Falinski, Liberal MP, and Patrick Corbin from the Labor Party. Let's start with you, Pat. Your leader begins the year under obvious pressure. I'm sure you'll agree. You don't need to add to that. The policy shifts in terms of
Tom, you should let
what's
him,
happening
you
here.
should let him add to that if he wants to.
Well, I will let him. You didn't even let me put the question to him, Jason. But some shifts here. Is this an indication that the current team isn't really cutting through in portfolios? Some of them have been there for a long, long time.
Well, we always said that, and Anthony always said that he'd reshuffle after the Prime Minister did his reshuffle at the end of the year. So we're doing exactly what we said we would do more than a month ago. So, of course, as we head to what is likely to be an election year, you're going to want to make sure that you've got the people in the best position to take it up to the government in each of those portfolios. And inevitably, as you say, some people have been in those portfolios a long time. If Anthony decides to move some people around, which is inevitably what happens with a reshuffle, you don't have a reshuffle where everyone stays in the same spot, then I trust Anthony's judgment that he's got everyone in the best position to put forward Labor's plans, Labor's policies, and hold the government to account.
So what about Chris Bowen going to energy and climate? Is that an indication, this goes from someone on the left of the party, Mark Butler, to the right of the party, Chris Bowen, that we're going to see some element of policy shift here?
Well, we'll wait till the announcement is done, but I think it's worth noting for all of your viewers that our policies are set by the Shadow Cabinet and by the caucus. Of course, anything that is put forward is not just shadow ministers out on a whim doing their own thing. They do it through a consultative process. I've got a lot of respect and time for both Chris Bowen and Mark Butler. They have both served in government and opposition. They are incredibly hard workers. I'm sure that if there are shifts amongst those portfolios, there will be a much more orderly transition of power than what we've seen in the United States in recent weeks. I think it will be a good thing to have a refreshed team putting it up to the government. And of course, we've seen, Josh Frydenberg used to be the energy minister not that long ago, and now he's got to stop the National Party trying to raid the piggy bank to build coal-fired power stations all over Australia.
We'll get to that in a moment. I like your low bar there. It'll be smoother than the US transition. That'll be tough. Jason Falinski, and I'll note you promised me you'd be in the studio this week. You're not, and you just had to get up mid-interview to do who knows what. So there's your first broken promise of the day. I want to ask you, though, about another call from the Nats on more coal-fired power. It comes under the guise of a manufacturing plan. What did you make of this week?
Well, firstly, Tom, can I say congratulations to Patrick. He's looking far too well rested as a new father. So, but congratulations on your delivery, Patrick. And also, I'm glad that Patrick hasn't been promoted, because then we wouldn't be able to have these political panels, as I would be far too beneath him for him to chair these things. Oh, maybe, you never know. It would be very nice if he did. Look, the call for new coal-fired power stations is a long-held belief of the National Party. It's no news to anyone that I personally believe that coal-fired power is not the answer looking forward, that there are more reliable and better forms of energy technology than coal-fired power as we look to provide cheap and reliable energy for Australian industry and Australian consumers into the future.
Well, I mean, a lot of Liberal MPs have been biting their tongues over the contribution of the Nats, both in party room and also publicly. It doesn't seem to be working, does it?
Look, I think one of the things that we have on our side of the fence is that there's, although you can't acknowledge all Fitzgibbon, is that we have a very healthy level of debate on these matters. But look, I think it's pretty obvious that where most people want to invest in terms of energy production moving forward into the 21st century is not in coal-fired power. That's not to say that coal-fired power stations won't have a role in our energy mix into the future, but where you will see growth in energy production in the Australian market and indeed in the global market will be in other forms of electricity.
But if there was this path that Scott Morrison went down of new coal-fired power, perhaps subsidised in some way, he might placate the Nats. He'd have a serious problem with the Liberal Party members, would he not?
Well, I would have a serious problem with my electorate, absolutely. That's not something that they would be in favour of. And I just don't think that the economics of it, more than anything else, actually stack up. That's the biggest problem we have.
Pat, I wanted to ask you about leadership rules. Joel Fitzgibbon is questioning them. Let's just remind ourselves that in opposition, you need 60% of the caucus to decide they want to spill the leader before it would happen. Then it's a joint vote by caucus and the party membership. It's a bit of a straitjacket, isn't it? 60%, it's a very high bar.
Well, these were the rules that the caucus put in place after we went through an incredibly difficult period a number of years ago. I support those rules. Those rules have given stability. They gave stability to Bill Shorten, they will give stability to Anthony Albanese, and they also mean that once we've made a decision, we just get on with trying to win the election. I don't believe that you wave the white flag and give up and say, oh, it's all too hard, we've got to go and fiddle with the rules. We've actually just got to go out and win more votes than we did last time. And when it comes to changing those leadership rules, what people are really saying is about taking away a say from our party members. Those rules delivered for the first time a say for Labor Party members to have a say in who their leader was. That was a historic reform. To take away...
Did you believe Joel Fitzgibbon?
Members, I would not.
When he says this call for a change around splitting it between caucus and party members, he said, don't conflate it with the current tensions at all. Do you believe him?
Oh, I take Joel at his word.
All right, you're not as cynical as me then. Is there an issue, if this were to happen right now, with Victoria? They have party voting rights suspended, so if you had a Victorian candidate, they'd be disadvantaged. Do you need a short and sharp solution for Victorian members to be able to vote on the most important thing they can do on the leadership of the party?
Well, I think this is where Joel and I would agree 100%. This is not something that we should be changing or talking or doing now. As for the situation in the Victorian branch, obviously it's been through an incredibly difficult period. I'm pleased to see they're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel and that branch is starting to get itself under control. But I'll always stand up for...
But they wouldn't get a vote, would they, if something happened this year?
Well, I don't think that's likely. And as for how you deal with the Victorian branch, I mean, I'm sure the National Executive will deal with that as they have done a number of times throughout 2020. The important thing is that you preserve the principle of people having a say in their political parties. It shouldn't just be up to us as elected members. It should be up to party members to have a say in who their leader is. And it's not now just the federal Labor Party. Most state branches of the Labor Party across the country have also adopted those rules because we recognise that when you empower your members, when you actually commit to democracy, you end up with a stronger political party for the long term.
Let's talk borders. Jason Falinski, you and all your brethren throughout Sydney can now head up to Queensland. I'm sure you're thrilled with this. You think it's a fantastic decision by the Queensland Premier and no other comments?
That's about the level of it, Tom. You know, what do you say? What do you say? Why don't, you know, they can put these borders up at a moment's notice, but it takes them weeks and weeks and weeks on end to bring them down. So, yeah, look, if you live on the northern beaches, you can go now. You can now go to Queensland. We're very happy.
Pat, after the school holidays, after the period of time when family might have been able to catch up, then the decision gets made. It doesn't seem that bold, does it?
Well, the virus doesn't work based on when school holidays and Christmas is. So I don't think we can criticise that this is somehow linked to school holiday times and trying to restrict families in that particular period.
Doesn't work around elections either, but we see
been
decisions made just after then.
It's been incredibly
And these decisions don't seem to be made on any sort
plans.
of advice either.
We had families that had made plans that were unable to fulfil those plans over Christmas and the school holiday period. Of course, I feel terrible for every family that has not been able to do the thing they've probably been looking forward to throughout the entirety of 2020, that is to get back together with their family. But it's good news that people can now travel from New South Wales to Queensland. I'm looking forward to an announcement from the West Australian Government likely next Monday that will, I hope, providing that everything continues as well as it is in the East Coast, start to remove some of the borders that were erected to prevent people being able to travel as easily to Western Australia. But we've got to take both sides of this. You've got to have a strong border response when it is the best way to protect a population, as we've seen with New Zealand, in terms of the Australian government, of which Jason's a part of, putting up a hard border against New Zealand and every other country in the world, for that matter. These things are necessary. It doesn't mean we like them. It doesn't mean they're nice. It doesn't mean that they work for everyone at the point in time they have to be erected. But the announcement today from the Queensland government is good news, and I welcome it.
Well, the WA government, there's a conservative approach on COVID. You won't get an argument from me on that one. Just finally, nearly out of time, Jason, and always be wary when I start a question like this, you're a straight talker. Your colleagues are avoiding this question. I know you won't. What do you make of some of your colleagues talking down the TGA, that the Australian government should be using other things to treat COVID and so on? I'm talking about Craig Kelly, George Christensen. What do you make of the information they're trying to put out there?
Well, Tom, I guess I'll just repeat what Greg Hunter said, which is our decisions are informed by the science and by the experts. We have an incredibly well-regarded authority in the TGA who make these assessments around pharmaceutical goods. You can certainly always suggest that there are better ways for them to do what they do, and I think I'm on the record as saying I think they take too long in some of their approval processes, but by and large they're considered to be one of the better agencies in the world. I think that's where we should stay, and we should obviously follow their advice and follow their processes.
All right. Good to hear those talking points again. Jason Falinski, Patrick Gorman, a pleasure. Welcome back to 2021. I assume you'll be back next week if I haven't been too harsh. Speak then. Thank you.
Hey, we'll be in Canberra next week, Tom.
You will. I'll see you here in the studio. Look forward to it.